Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Jonathan Harmon with the J. Harmon Home Team with David Criswell. I think this is actually the first time we've met in person, isn't it?
Too. I think
we've talked on the phone several times.
And you had the listing on 804 Main Street in condos.
Yeah, the little condo.
Columns.
You still have that?
I do, yep.
Yeah, do you love it?
It's great. It's been great so far.
Good. Well, I'm now your neighbor, sort of.
That's right.
Right. So I bought the house right next door to those. And, I think people were scared of living next to those condos. But, man, they're fantastic neighbors with that big fence in the middle, of course.
Yeah, it's a nice complex. The homeowners association stays on top of everything.
They do, and it's a neat little spot. But anyway, so we're not going to talk about condos too much unless we need to.
Yeah.
But David is involved in all kinds of stuff. He owns several rental properties. How many properties do you own?
Roughly 50.
About 50 properties?
Yeah.
You manage them all yourself?
I do.
Yep. Here just in Rutherford County?
Everything I own is within a mile of the square.
Beautiful. That's awesome. And you do some short-term rental?
I do short-term
But
rentals.
your short-term is more like medium-term, right?
It's 30 to 180 day rentals. Yeah.
Gotcha.
People that need a place for 1 to 6 months if they're in transition for a home or in town. I rent to some business people and consultants and things like that.
Gotcha. And then David's wife, Katie, is a realtor with the Parks office here in Murfreesboro, right?
Yep.
And she's a very talented agent. So just a generally real estate related family, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Y'all got kids?
We do. We have 2 daughters.
Are they selling real estate?
Not yet, but about 3 years away. So. Emily's 3 and Alana's 6.
Gotcha. Yeah, about 3 years away.
Yep.
Perfect. That's awesome. So we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. And actually, before we went on, we were talking. He goes, "You're going to spoil all the good stuff." And so anyway, we were kind of speculating and talking a little bit about what's going on with some of the big hedge fund companies that have bought up a lot of the. I'm going to say the majority of their stuff is the lower end properties, right? The starter homes. But they do have some stuff in kind of that medium range as well.
Yep.
And what happens if, right? Like we were running all kinds of scenarios and speculating. It was pretty interesting. We got Bobby Waldron and Nick Howell. You know Nick?
I do know Nick. What's up, buddy? He's a real estate hustler like me.
And Nick's an interesting feller as well.
Yeah.
So we were talking about Brian Derryberry earlier. But
yeah.
Anyway, so and of course you see in the description here, you like to argue on Facebook.
I don't know that I'd like to, but sometimes it's necessary, right?
You like good public discourse.
Public discourse. I was telling you when we were arguing about all the big companies coming in buying up all the rentals. Like I would present a point and you would present a counterpoint, and I enjoyed that. I enjoy debate, and certainly whether it's real estate related or
politics,
yeah,
or downtown dwelling.
Downtown dwelling. That's another one. Yeah.
David was extremely sad when Bill Jakes pulled the plug on the downtown dwellers for a short period of time.
Yeah. It's Bill is the man, and that group is one of the few Facebook groups that actually serves a worthwhile purpose.
I agree.
And
Bill's a great guy.
Absolutely.
So shout out to Bill Jakes. We love you, buddy.
Yep.
And keep fighting the good fight, man. Don't let the B words get you down, right? And of course your latest love, Making a Murderer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hopefully I have not talked to a single other person yet who's watched the entire thing, so I'm not going to do spoilers here.
Okay. But
Stephen Avery is probably innocent, and then conversely, Brendan Dassey is also definitely innocent. He got railroaded. It's a bummer, but yeah.
So watch Making a Murderer and then strike up a conversation with this guy.
Let's talk about it. I want to talk about it.
All right, cool. And until then, talk amongst yourselves, right? That's the coffee talk thing.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's pick up kind of where we were talking about. You have a ton of rental properties yourself. For an individual, you have a pretty big portfolio, which is fantastic. Good for you.
Thanks.
And you manage those. Do you have another job as well, or is that?
I have. There's 4 sources of income on my tax return every year. One of them is I'm my wife's assistant. I'm not a realtor, but my wife is a realtor. I am technically her unlicensed assistant. I have another.
That's smart, by the way.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Yeah. I have another eBay business that's pretty much dead. Back in 2005, 2006, it was really booming, and now there's not really. Basically, just selling off inventory that I still have. That's pretty much gone. And then we have the rentals, and then we flip houses, buy them, fix them up, and sell them. I bought a few hoarder houses, cleaned them out, and ended up selling them as is. Pretty much everything real estate, whatever I can do to find a deal and figure out a way to make it work.
Gotcha. Nick loves hoarder houses, by the way. I don't know if you're aware of that, but he actually purchased one that I had listed not too long ago. And Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you sold it finally. I think you closed on it, the one in South Nashville. So anyway, that was an exciting time. It had a hole in the roof and everything.
Yeah, I think I saw some videos he did.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Well, depending on how you define fun, I suppose.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about is, there's a couple of companies out right now, and they've been around for several years now. American Homes for Rent, the Frio, and whatever that has evolved into several different variations.
Main Street Renewal is one. Progress or Progressive or
Progress,
something like
Progress Leasing, I think is what they call themselves. And basically they are managing a ton of properties, buying them up. They're paying close to, and in some cases, at least a couple years ago, even over market for these homes. And then they turn around and rent them. They put them to their specs and then rent them. And our question was, where is the market right now? Right? Is our market bulletproof? Which it's not, right? And what is going to be, what's going to happen over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And my statement was, you said you feel like our market is flattening to some extent and not necessarily declining. And you said that you don't know that there's a lot that's going to make our market decline, especially not sharply like it did in 09, right? 08, 09.
For sure.
And I said, well, what happens if they decide to just unload their properties, right? Because, I mean, quite literally, they control thousands of homes in Middle Tennessee. So what happens if they decide to unload their inventory? And that's where the conversation evolved. So catching you guys up. And you said you don't think that they would do that.
Yep.
So shall we continue?
Yeah, the American Homes for Rent, let's take them for just as an instance because they're probably the largest one. They were the first one that I ever saw buying it when I was looking around tax records and I saw a house that they bought and I thought, wow, that sold for a lot of money. And I clicked on tax records to look up who the owner was, and it was them. I said, oh, I wonder who this is. And by the time I got there, they owned 5 pages of stuff. And
right.
I'm going, wow. Look at these guys. They're buying a bunch and they're paying top dollar. And obviously they saw that the market was set for substantial appreciation in the next few years. And they were paying numbers for houses that didn't really make a lot of sense to me just from a return, a rental rate versus purchase price, return on investment standpoint.
Right.
What I didn't factor in and what I wish, obviously hindsight's 2020, and knowing what I know now, boy, if I knew it back in 2012, holy cow.
Yeah, or 2009 even.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
I feel like we were a year or two behind the rest of the country, their bottom. I didn't really see things get really bad here until at least price-wise, prices bottoming out. The best deals that I ever purchased were in 2011 and 2012.
Really?
Yeah, because it took a couple years for some of those things to snowball into the really, really deflated market that hit us.
Most people would say 10 and 11 was the absolute bottom. We started to see little flashes up, in the end of 11 and then into 12.
Yeah.
But if you were still fine, that's good.
Yeah, we got some pretty good deals back in 2011. And the thing that's upsetting is how many I passed on during that time at $80,000 because there was a better deal for 75. Well, now that house is worth 180.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that look like geniuses right now because they
Lake Forest Estates in Laverne is.
Oh yeah.
Good heavens! I wish I'd spent $1 million in there in 2010.
Yep. Unbelievable. So back to American Homes for Rent. What are they going to do? Well, one thing that we didn't talk about was they have leases on these properties. So homes that are single-family homes that are being sold to owner-occupants are most valuable empty. An owner-occupant doesn't want to buy a house and then wait 6 months for the lease to end. So that's one thing that would taper off the time of sale.
Sure.
Is all these other people who are locked into leases. They don't. American Homes for Rent doesn't care about Murfreesboro. They don't care about our community. They're in it for the money. It's a business just like everything else.
Because you can invest in it, right? Like you can.
I don't know.
I think so. I think they have at least a couple of them. I believe. I mean, they're hedge funds.
Yeah.
So REITs, I guess.
Their duty is to maximize profit for the shareholders, whoever that may be.
Right.
And in my mind, a big fire sale, we're going to sell everything off as quickly as we can. I don't know that does any good for their shareholders. But at some point, if they see, I mean, obviously they saw the market increases that were coming in 2012. If they see market decreases coming and they say, whoa, we got to get out now, they could list 500 houses on MLS tomorrow.
Right.
And that would have a drastic effect on our market.
So my thing is, right now Nashville is still riding high on the horse as an it city, right? Has been for a while. That will always change at some point, right? Nashville will no longer be an it city sometime, right? Whether it's 2 years from now, 10 years from now, it will happen. Okay, so when that happens, a lot of folks are kind of calling it a rental bubble, is more so even than the sales bubble. We have rents that are extremely high, you know that. And we have, I've had some friends that work in property management, like at apartments, they're at 97% occupancy. That is quite literally full, because 3% is just when we're swapping out carpet, right? And so, healthy is about 90% is what they tell us. That's what they aim for. And so at some point when people stop moving here or taper off, right, then those rents will come down. They'll offer incentives and various other things. And we're starting to see that, by the way, a little bit with new construction building, right? We're starting to see, here's a free porch, here's some closing costs, here's a refrigerator, and that's always a leading indicator of where our market is heading. It's flattening out.
Absolutely.
So at that point, if they paid $150,000 for this house in 2011, okay, and then they've rented it, and they've got, say, we'll just make the math, $12,000 a year on it, right? They've rented it $1,000 a month, and they've done that over the course of 7-8 years, right? They've also depreciated it for tax purposes over that period of time. That asset is worth less to them than what they paid for it on the books, so they can afford to unload it. Now, your point was they still want to maximize the money, sure, but if they sense the wind's completely changing, is it easier to just throw everything on the market and rip the Band-Aid off, or do they want to try to trickle it out there? If we don't know the answer.
It's a great question, and I'd say we're probably going to find out in the next few years as some of these people realize what maybe you and I and other people who are in touch with the market are realizing, that is these crazy 12 and 15% property value increases that we've had in the last few years are starting to taper off. And I'll tell you this, I've been looking at it prior to the beginning of this year. Well, I sold one in October of last year. Prior to October of 2017, I had never sold a property that I had rented before. I've sold 5 this year, and I'm selling 5 more in the next 2 weeks. And that is because I firmly believe that 2-3 years from now, I will be able to buy those properties back for the same amount of money, or possibly even less. And if that's the case, I want to free up some money so that I'm in a better position to be able to buy 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever that looks like. Whenever, we keep having these booms and busts. You go back to, at least the .com bubble. We had a big economic boom during that, and then we had a bust. Then we had the housing boom in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. Then we had the bust, and now we're in another big game. And I hope that there's not a bust coming. I want just 1 or 2 or 3% annual.
Would that be nice?
Oh, I know it would. I had a buddy. The reason I do real estate, I had a buddy in college who was a few years older than me, and he kind of explained to me rental properties. He said, look, you buy a house, you fix it up, you rent it out, the tenants pay the mortgage, and then at the end of the mortgage, it's money. It's free money for you. And I thought, he just broke it down so simply. I'll give him credit. His name is Stacy Campfield. A lot of you guys know him. He was a former politician. And Stacy, I love you if you're watching this, which you're probably not because he's busy and whatever. But he's the reason that I started doing this. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, my father, I remember crawling under houses with my dad when I was growing up, and he had some rental properties.
Yeah.
But Stacy was really the main person who laid it out so simply and said, look at this. You know, you buy a house and somebody else pays for it, and then at the end of it, there's no mortgage. You own it. You've got rent coming in every month off of it. And it's like, this is genius. You know, why doesn't everybody do this? So I started going with it. And where was I headed with this? I lost my train of thought. What was the point I was trying to make with
the boom, the bust, the 3%?
Oh, yeah. I never would have dreamed that we were going to have these big booms and busts. And you go back to 2011 when I probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20 rentals. I probably had zero equity in all those. I don't know that I could have sold. I don't know that I could have sold anything that I owned in 2011 for what I owed and walked away with a check. You know, and that's because the property values did this big incline and then they did this big decline. And I don't think that that's good for anybody. It's good for a few people if they can time the market right. But for your average Joe who just wants to buy a house, live in it, you know, make his mortgage payments for 20 or 30 years and then retire in it and not have to worry about making a mortgage payment. Boy, if you have to move at the wrong time, if you get a job transfer,
yeah.
You're hosed. I don't think that these long-term booms and busts are good for anybody.
I agree with that. And you know, here's the other thing. Scott Abernathy.
Yeah.
You know him. I had him on here a few weeks ago, and he was talking about how in the investment realm, real estate wise, if your strategy is to try to time the market, that is an extremely dangerous game to play. If not impossible to play long term. Yeah. Right? You might get lucky here and there. But long term, that's a hard one. So back to the hedge funds, I don't know that that's what they're trying to do. I think they saw this area as a good long term strategy. We were also talking a little bit about, you know, you mentioned 12, 13, 14, 15% appreciation each year. What people need to realize, and this is kind of I used to teach economics, right? So economics is nothing more than money sociology. That's all it is, right? And it's how does this group of people view wealth within their particular market, whatever that happens to be. Mm-hmm. And so it's all based on feelings, right? And so for the past several years, let's say 2, 3, 4 years, you were talking about this, it's all been like this sense of urgency, like prices are going up, interest rates are going to go up, right? How many years have we been hearing interest rates are going to go up, interest rates are going to go up, and then they went down. You know, but it creates this desperation, right? Yep. And then
if I don't buy now, I'm going to miss out. And there's a lot of people. I mean, you take Evergreen Farms. My wife sold a place for a friend of ours probably about 3 years ago now, and she sold it for $165. If you'd have come back 18 months later, that property was $190.
Yeah.
You know, and so people who I got to take a little time to get my credit cleaned up, or I got to be on the job for 12 months before I can qualify for this loan. When they came back to look,
they lost affordability big time.
Oh my gosh!
And interest rates did fluctuate. So depending on when you timed it, you know, it could have been as much as a half a point higher, which makes a difference. $15,000 and a half a point.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you can't afford that house.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you
could have two identical houses in Evergreen Farms, and one person bought it in 2014 and the other person bought it in 2017. 2017's mortgage might be 30-40% higher, you know, just because purchase price is higher. And now, you know, it's since about the beginning of this year, I guess, when interest rates really started
actually increased. Yeah. So traditional right now sitting at about 5.25, you know, and that's not really high in the history of the country, but that's high compared to where it's been for the last 8 years.
Yep.
But
I will say this, and you know, this is back to the devil's advocate. As much as I hate, you know, I'm getting a loan on a duplex that I'm going to be purchasing in the next few weeks, and I'm looking at a 5.75 or so interest rate. As much as I hate these increased interest, in April of last year, I got a 4.5% rate. So I'm 1.5 higher almost now. As much as I hate that, we almost need, there's two things that I think we need for housing stability. I think we need no loans offered for less than 10% down, and I think interest rates need to be at around 6%. And that way, People have incentive to stay in their house. You know, these people who are buying right now, let's say prices do decline 5 or 10%, and they're upside down, and they lose their job. What incentive do they have to stay? The same lack of incentive that they had in 2009. So people walk away, and then it compounds and it balloons out of control.
Drops us right back in.
And I think that until we have 6%, and granted, realtors do not like it when I say this, because if we went to 6% interest rates with a minimum of 10% down across all loan products, housing prices might drop 40% overnight, because it would immediately make the housing prices that we've got right now. You can barely get into Evergreen Farms for less than $200,000.
Right.
Imagine if everybody had to bring 10% to closing and they were looking at a 6% interest rate. What would that home be? It would be worth 130 or 140 or 150.
Right.
And so you got a whole lot of people that are upside down. So it's not something that is going to happen overnight. But I think that the only way that we're going to have long-term stability instead of these big, mountains and valleys is 6%, 10% down.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I've never heard anybody else say that. I don't know that economists would agree. I don't like the idea that the Federal Reserve is dictating to us what rates should be. In a perfect world, those would be dictated by supply and demand.
Yeah, it's market.
And but they're not.
Well, and that's why the interest rates have been so low. I mean, they've been held artificially low. And the bottom line is, it's not good for investment. It's not good for my strategy is not to make money off of my savings account, but it would be nice to make more than 0.01%, right?
Right, but there's no room for that when your mortgage is 3%.
There's no margin.
And so here we are.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're starting to get back up to that. In fact, I think First Bank or somebody had on their billboard the other day 2.5% on a CD, which was the highest I've seen in years.
A decade.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about those increases, and this is what people don't always realize. Last year, let's say we appreciated 12 to 14%, depending on the market. That's probably the specific sub-market. That's probably pretty accurate. And what people don't realize is that is not, if it's 12%, that's not a percent per month, right? That is a huge chunk in the spring.
Yep.
And then it actually can fall a little bit in this time of year, but it averages out to 12% increase, right? And so right now it's really interesting. I'm seeing this with my listings. I'm sure Katie has too. I'm sure you have as well. Prices are starting to do this number, and it feels like they're decreasing. I equate it to government spending, right? Government's going to raise spending 5%, but we're going to cut spending and only going to raise it 3%, right? So that's a cut, okay? So there's a little bit of that speculation. Plus, we're in the retraction portion of the year anyway. Plus, we're slowing down. And so people are kind of freaking out that their houses are on the market for 2 weeks, which is kind of crazy.
Historically is incredible.
Right. It should have been, last year it would have been on the market for 3 hours.
Yeah. It's like when you're driving 100 miles an hour and then you slow down to 70 because
right.
It 70 feels like you're barely moving after you've been driving 100. Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting place, and all of that leads to this mentality, and we're seeing like this groupthink, if you will. We're seeing people being hesitant. There's a little bit more inventory available. Greater Nashville Association released their numbers. They said inventory is down, but what they didn't say is that available inventory, at least here, is actually up a little bit. So I pulled numbers last week, I guess it was, and houses under $225,000 was 240 available in Rutherford County. And that doesn't include the under contract. So it's literally available. Wow. That's a lot for where we've been for the last 3 years.
That is a lot.
I remember seeing 50 available.
Yeah, we listed one in Smyrna for 209, probably about 6 weeks or 2 months ago. And the day we listed it, there were 13 houses under $200,000 available. I'm sorry, no, there were 9 houses available in Smyrna under $200,000.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was 210, whatever. Somewhere in that ballpark. And that's, to have 240, that's quite a bit higher than we've had any time in the last 2 or 3 years.
And granted, some of those were garbage, but they were stuff that somebody might scoop up to flip or whatever. But still, that was very telling to me, and people are allowed to be more selective. You mentioned, if with those rates tick up and the prices have ticked up, they can't afford some of this stuff. Finding a livable, nice home, single family under 140 in Rutherford County right now,
I mean, I would go as far as to say under 180 or 190. I mean, in my mind, Evergreen Farms is a good starter home neighborhood. I mean, this is nothing against Evergreen Farms, but it's a lot of starter homes. You know,
Sure.
a lot of people who buy their first home in Murfreesboro, it's going to be an Evergreen Farms.
Absolutely.
Probably more than just about any other neighborhood, just because based on
The
size
type of homes.
and,
Yeah.
well, and the size of the neighborhood too. You know, thousands of homes,
Right.
right? And so you look at that, and you look at affordability, and you figure most of these houses are you know, around $200,000 now. Murfreesboro is a working class town, and that's nothing against Murfreesboro, but we're not Brentwood. We're not going to be, and people need to be able to have a $1,000, $1,100 a month mortgage, and that's getting increasingly harder to do in Evergreen Farms, just because there's no lots available, and the lots that are being built on, the few that are being built on, the starting prices are over 200.
Well, because they're spending $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on the lot, you can't put a $200,000 house on that and make any money. I mean, you can't.
It's true. Yep.
So it's a pretty interesting place where we are.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, it's sort of like, you ever been sailing? I'm big on analogies, by the way. You ever been sailing and the wind is blowing the sails and they're full and beautiful and you're going in a straight line, and then all of a sudden that wind just goes just a little bit and it starts to flap a little bit. We're still moving, but we're just not. There's a little uncertainty, right? And uncertainty just, I mean, that makes people more uneasy than anything else, right?
It's true.
So,
Yeah.
interesting
Good points.
stuff.
Good points.
Yeah, you
Good
too.
points.
We should have met before.
I know. Where have you been, man? Oh, you drink coffee and I don't. That's what
Oh,
it is.
yeah,
That's
that's
why I'm
what
not
it is.
hanging out here.
So, hey, we're going to do a kind of a special edition of this.
Okay.
Hopefully Monday. Brett's working on getting that organized. And we're going to get a couple of folks on and have kind of a round table with some of this. And we're going to talk about the market, okay, and where we are. And we've already done a lot of that now, but I'd like to have you on there if you don't mind.
I'd love to. Yeah, that'd be great.
So what if somebody's looking for a rental, how do they get in touch with you?
How do you get in touch? So I think everything that I've got is rented right now. But my number is 615-364-5655, or you can catch me here on Facebook.
He doesn't like text
probably
messages.
The easiest way. Don't text me. We're all adults here. Text is what 14-year-old girls do. Facebook Messenger is what adults do.
Oh, okay.
Just
Okay.
kidding.
Thank you
Just
for
kidding.
clarifying that.
Just kidding.
I texted him and it took him forever to answer me. He goes, "Well, don't text me. Send me a Facebook message."
message. Yeah. So I'll tell you the explanation for that, because I've made this joke a bunch of times. If I miss it on my phone, which often happens, you know, I pick it up and I got a text and I swipe it away and then I forget to go back and look at it. But if it's Facebook Messenger, when I get to the computer, I'll have an open box and I go, there we go.
Gotcha.
Forgot to respond to that one later. So that's the explanation for that.
Gotcha.